I did see. Okay, so today, myself and Laura and a group of people took part in a training exercise or a training day or a training course, whatever you want to say it. Laura is a professional trainer in complicated grief, and as we know, Derry has been plagued by suicides and lots of grief from lots of different areas and whatever reasons, and so on. So I just wanted to take a short video just to let Laura introduce herself and talk us a wee bit about the training today and what we've done. So, how would you describe the course that we did today? What would you describe it as?
Yeah, okay. So we did a workshop today on complicated grief, and the reason why we did that was because there's a lot of expertise out there in the psychotherapeutic world and counselling world and community services world about grief in general. So there's a lot of people that are proficient in grief work, but often we find that complicated grief actually has a different etiology, for want of a better word. It has a different way of working out in the lives of people. So we often we find that by using just standard grief work with people who are actually experiencing complicated grief, that they can often not improve and they'll get to a place where they get stuck, and that actually a different approach is often needed to what we would call normal functional grief processes.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, in a scenario where Summer is experiencing a lot of grief through suicide or just grief in general, from maybe historic grief, it might be family grief or whatever, how would you view the training session that we did today? How would you view that for other professionals that are working in that field?
In what way?
How would that improve practice, or how would that help?
Oh, look, I mean, I guess the takeaway is that things have changed a lot. The literature and the research has, in the last 10 odd years, there's been a real push to try and get to the bottom of what's going on with complicated grief, and a lot of pointed specific research going into trying to figure out what it is it different to other types of grief, and is there successful interventions that actually work. And the place that we are getting to is that there are one of the models that we looked at today gets a 70% success rate in people making positive shifts, so that's obviously a really a great thing for the field to know. But the thing is that because it's quite new, a lot of people don't know about it.
Yeah. I certainly wasn't fully aware of what complicated grief was going to look at and what I was going to feel. We were talking very earlier on in the day about suicides and the means to suicides, and I brought this up earlier. We just kind of as a side conversation, and it was around the use of bridges for suicide. And now we have in our hometown had a massive campaign around netting on bridges. Now a lot of people have kind of questioned the theory or the what's behind this, but sure they can do it anyway. There's another way they can do it.
Yeah.
And you had somebody saying that, and I think it's very important that we now put on a record that your views on it, so to speak.
Sure. Okay. I mean, also as well as complicated grief, there's been a lot of work done in the suicidal ideation area and also suicidal behaviour area, and we're starting to reframe the way that we look at it. I think today in the workshop we talked about the traditional risk assessments that kind of goes through protective factors and risk factors and how detailed people's plans are and this kind of thing. But in reality, we often find that people who do complete suicide, we're left scratching our head because we didn't see it coming. And that often, sometimes they've just had a session and they're feeling good, and they'll even say, "Yep, we did some great work today," and then within a day or two they're gone. So this has baffled therapists and researchers for a long time, and some of the newer research is coming out to say that actually those risk assessments need to be looking at three things really, and one of them is perceived burdensomeness. And that's an idea that in some way they feel like they're doing the world a favour.
Yeah.
And that if they feel like they're being an imposition, or if they can see that they're difficult to be around for their friends and family. Also, social isolation obviously is a huge one, and we were talking today about it's hard to even articulate what level of disenfranchisement somebody must be feeling to actually get to that point. But it's extreme, feeling like there's actually no one else not necessarily in their corner, because often people have lots of support people, but it's about having someone that really connects with them.
Absolutely, yeah.
It really has the synergy of connection is often lacking. And the third one is getting desensitised to death in some way. So that can happen in multiple different ways. For some people, they'll get there through experiencing someone else, loss of somebody else. It can come through, we're talking about self-harm and that kind of thing. It can help people become desensitised to the idea. But those three things, often if we go back retrospectively and look at people who their risk assessment didn't actually put them at high risk, if we go back and look with those filters, we tend to see actually they hit all three. So it's,
So we brought up the notion of having nets on bridges.
yeah.
What's your opinion on those?
Well, I always go back to the research, and there has been some done on this, and it shows that it does decrease. It does decrease the rate, and the reason is because there's that age-old argument of if they're going to do it, they're going to find a way to do it anyway. But that's not actually what the research says. What the research says is that people who are highly suicidal often live in this absolute ambivalence. From one moment to the next, they don't even actually know whether they want to be here or not, and they actually don't know specifically when they're going to do it. Some people have a plan, but even then, it can change, and often it's not uncommon for people to make plans for the next day. It's not uncommon for them to act as if everything is completely normal. Sometimes they're even in a great mood, and everyone thinks, oh, they're actually getting better. And then out of nowhere they'll be gone. And it seems like to us that it's out of nowhere, but for them, it's actually having a pre-planned, something that they prepared earlier on, taking off the shelf, and just finding an opportunity to actually act on it. So that's why reducing access to means is a really big one, because if someone is really sitting in that 50-50, may not, putting an option right in front of them, it just depends on which side of the 50-50 you catch them on. So if you take that means away, we also know from the research that the majority of people who survive a suicide attempt by jumping off a building on the way down, they immediately regret it. Most of them.
Wow.
Most of them that survive.
It's unreal, isn't it?
Most of them.
Unreal statistic.
Of course, there are a few that will, get taken to hospital and then will actually complete it later on. But the majority, so that tells us that anything that we can do to prolong it means that we have a chance of actually. The majority don't go on to complete in another means if they do survive, which tells us that they could actually. There's a way through.
Well, I mean, I really enjoyed today, and thank you very much for allowing me to be here. Yes, we'll just sign off on that now, folks, and thank Laura for her piece.
You're welcome.
Chat later. Bye.